Welcome to your astrological forecast for the week of Monday, November 25th through Sunday, December 1st, 2024. This week we're really changing the pace of things. I think we're really kind of looking away from the world, looking kind of like turning into ourselves. I think that's what's happening. And that's because of multiple factors. We have Mercury stationing retrograde on Monday this week, November 25th. Also, though, we have a new moon on Sunday. So really this whole week we're leading up to a new moon. So we're diving into Mercury retrograde and the moon is kind of losing its last kind of bits of light as it becomes what will be a new moon, right? So both of those happening simultaneously, it basically means we're kind of looking within. Like I said, we're having less of a linear or a direct, like action-oriented focus right now. And really the focus is much more on the non-physical, like turning inward and kind of integrating and reflecting. And I know none of that is like it's not the sexiest thing to talk about. It's not the most fun part of the cycle, so to speak. But this is necessary. I think we may need this. We may need kind of a break from all the action that's been happening. A lot has been happening. A lot of things have been changing. And so, this is why this kind of phase, this kind of period is necessary astrologically. That being said, as I mentioned recently as well, these things aren't really accounted for in our schedules, in our calendars. And so this is why periods like this become so dysfunctional because we have to carry on as if it's just, business as usual. But, the planets, the moon, they're not supporting it. They don't see it that way, so to speak. Let's kind of dive into it. I'm actually going to go day by day for this forecast, starting out with Monday. So Monday, November 25th, this is the day where technically Mercury stations retrograde. I always mention how it's not as simple. It's not like a light switch. It's not like, one day Mercury's direct and the next day Mercury's retrograde. On paper, it may appear that way, but it's not really that simple. It's more like a freight train. It, slows down, comes to a stop, and then slowly starts gaining speed in the other direction. That's what Mercury does when it appears to go retrograde. That's what any planet does when it retrogrades. So really, it's been a gradual process. We've already been experiencing the change of pace through much of, if not all of, last week. And so now this is just the day where technically things really start to move in the other direction, I should say. So this is, I've said before that the beginning of Mercury retrograde, I would say, is generally the most dysfunctional part of the retrograde process because we're not used to this. Most people aren't aware of astrology. This catches us off guard. So this is where you'll see things get a little bit dysfunctional, to say the least. But like I covered, like I've hopefully alluded to, this doesn't have to be dysfunctional. As long as we're kind of embracing this different pace of things, it's okay. We can be open to maybe seeing things from a different perspective, looking outside the box, looking within ourselves. As I mentioned too, this is very kind of reflective, very intuitive energy that we are moving into. It's just very kind of alien to our, Western linear forward moving, productive kind of mentality that we want to embrace. So it's not bad, it's just different. The 13% or so of the population that is born with Mercury retrograde will embrace this much easier than the rest of us. You guys are used to this type of thing. You're already kind of out of the box and intuitive, so this will be a no-brainer for you. But for many of us, we may be privy to some very unusual information because Mercury's not only stationing retrograde, it's stationing retrograde in Sagittarius where it's in detriment. And you know what I say about detriment placements, they're very out of the box. So not only do we feel out of the box in the sense that we are left out, we're out in the cold, we're outside of the mainstream. This is applying to the information that we're coming across, since that's what we're talking about with Mercury. So when it comes to the information and the communication, we are outside of the box, but that opens us up to different types of information that we might not usually be open to. So it's a weird energy. It may be very uncomfortable for a lot of us, but it can be extremely useful. And it can really open us up to a lot of new possibilities when it comes to this, information and communication. Going ahead to Tuesday, we don't have any aspects, but Moon continues through Libra. It actually Moon sextiled the Sun on Monday, so that was a pretty harmonious dynamic. That will be kind of overshadowed by Mercury stationing retrograde, though. That's usually pretty dysfunctional, like I said. So coming into Tuesday, we're still experiencing a lot of dysfunction from Mercury just, so recently stationing retrograde. Mercury hasn't even had the chance to start, building up that steam, building up that momentum in that apparent retrograde motion yet. So still, I would say generally pretty dysfunctional. But we at least have the Moon and Sun not exactly sextiling by aspect, but sextiling by sign. So in other words, Sagittarius Sun, Libra Moon, these energies are pretty harmonious. Sun is pretty content in Sagittarius, Moon is pretty content in Libra. There is some kind of harmony there. Again, Mercury did just station retrograde, so things are pretty weird right now, but there is some kind of harmony. That's the best way I can put it. But things are winding down. The Moon is losing light with each day, and therefore the focus is just becoming increasingly internal. It's more about our thoughts and feelings right now rather than like, let me put it this way. This is one of the worst times for a bold move. And I'm not saying that it's like, if you need to make a big change in your life right now and it feels right, by all means go ahead and do it. But that's not where most of us are going to be right now. We're kind of retreating. We're going within ourselves. Both the lunar phase and Mercury are supporting that, if that makes sense. I hope that makes sense. I'm going to continue on and hopefully I can kind of flesh that out as we proceed. For Wednesday, November 27th, the Sun is still in Sagittarius. That has not really changed. Moon will go through the last few degrees of Libra, and then it will enter Scorpio. Looks like pretty late in the day, Eastern Standard Time. And we do have two aspects today, so other than the Moon changing signs, that's not as big of a deal as it sounds. Moon is barely a crescent at this point. It doesn't have a lot of light. It's not really its own. Like, that's kind of just supporting this continuous trend toward becoming more internalized and more inward focused, if that makes sense. But we do have two aspects today, so that would be Venus squaring Chiron and Sun trining Mars. Really funky, kind of mixed messages we're getting today. Sun trining Mars, both in fire signs, Sun in Sagittarius, Mars in Leo. This would typically suggest a really great day for being confident, being very enthusiastic. Both Mars and Sun are pretty like fiery energies, and they're both in fire signs as well. So they're both fairly strong, and they're both agreeing. They're connecting through this very harmonious trine aspect. So yeah, they are both saying go forward, do something new, whatever you personally want, follow that. And be spontaneous, allow that kind of fiery part of your nature to take hold. So that's one message that we're getting. But again, we have to take into account the greater picture here. Mercury just stationed retrograde and the Moon is winding down. It's about to close out a lunar cycle this week. So I would still say the greater picture is saying, looking within, becoming more inward focused, becoming more intuitive. Generally speaking, we're entering a less physically active, energetic phase. It's more active cerebrally or emotionally. Okay, so that's the general picture, but we do have this one particular aspect on Wednesday, November 27th. The Sun Mars trine, even if nothing else is supporting kind of action and new, like, bold activity, at least we have this one aspect that is supporting that type of thing. So if you did need to make a change and you were already thinking about it, today might be a good day, but still, it's something that I would really put a lot of thought into because the entire chart is not at all supporting that, but we do have this one aspect. This is where astrology gets complicated because sometimes it gives you mixed messages. So, I've been said that I contradict myself, but that's because the astrology contradicts itself. This is a great example. You're getting a lot of messages saying, don't start anything new, let's reflect on what's already happened. But then you're also getting this one message saying, start something new, be spontaneous. So it's a little bit conflicted, and it may be confusing and especially chaotic today. One more aspect for Wednesday, November 27th, we have Venus squaring Chiron. This is another weird one. I think Wednesday is going to be a pretty weird day in general. Really, this whole week is weird. But Wednesday with Venus squaring Chiron, that basically just entails that I'll give you the good and the bad. So on the negative side for this aspect, we're going to have more empathy. And I know that's generally a good thing, right? But this is potentially an uncomfortable kind of empathy. We may all be more empathetic whether we want to or not. So we're all very aware of each other's thoughts and feelings. That can actually be very awkward. I think Chiron, it is all about empathy, but it's also a very awkward planetoid. It just, in an ideal world, we would all have, excellent empathy, and we could read each other's minds all the time and just synergize. But can you imagine reading each other's minds right now, the way the world currently is? I mean, that would be incredibly awkward. It would be incredibly dysfunctional. So honestly, that's kind of the energy that we get here when we get Chiron aspects. So that's kind of the negative side, being a little bit too sensitive to each other's thoughts and feelings. And maybe picking up on, insecurities, picking up on sensitivities, picking up on fears, feelings, thoughts, all of it. That's the negative side. On the plus side, that, in the right situation, this can be excellent for facilitating, deep conversations, therapeutic conversations. It's really weird because both Venus and Chiron are very... they're all about kind of empathy, love, relationships and things like that. But they're in very individualistic signs. Venus is in Capricorn, Chiron is in Aries. So they're both, how do I put this? They're both about not attraction. They're both about things that would typically be connecting us, but they're sort of individualistically focused, if that makes sense. So in other words, we are very empathetic, and yet we're also very individualistic at this time. So it's sort of I very much feel what I'm feeling, and you very much feel what you're feeling, and maybe we can pick up on that, but we're feeling completely different things because we're both focused on ourselves. Does that make sense? Again, I kind of have to blame the astrology because I know that message sounds weird, but it's a weird message. That's the best I can translate that for you. Next, let's go to Thursday, November 28th. Fortunately, we don't have any aspects today. I think we already had more than enough on Wednesday. But Moon continues through Scorpio here. So now we're really getting into the dark moon here. The moon has little to no light at this point, and with Mercury still pretty freshly retrograde, we're very much going within, especially considering Moon is in Scorpio, which is a very kind of internal sign. We're going within. I think our thoughts and feelings are heavier at this time, and we may not all yet be aware of that because this is kind of a recent phenomenon that's taking place this week. So I think some of us may just be starting to become aware of, oh wow, I'm just having some deep thoughts and feelings, and I just haven't really sorted them out yet. And that's perfectly okay. We have the next, the following days and weeks where we're going to kind of unravel this kind of weird gift box that just kind of appeared in our minds, if that makes sense. I feel like such a weirdo talking about this stuff, but honestly, that's what's happening. I think I'm onto something. If it doesn't make sense right now, come back to this forecast during the week or after the week, and I promise you it'll make sense. I promise you. But saying this all, even, I'm filming this obviously like before the week that I'm talking about. So as I say it, it sounds crazy to me, but I think that kind of just goes to show you how kind of honestly dramatically the energy is changing this week. So it is what it is. Friday, November 29th, moon continues through Scorpio. Honestly, Friday looks kind of like a continuation of Thursday. Mercury still recently retrograde, moon still continuing through Scorpio, losing light. It's just continuing this process of looking within. For better or for worse, we're becoming more aware of what's going on inside our own minds, inside our own hearts, bodies, maybe, etc. So, yeah, potentially very uncomfortable, but very necessary. Another thing I forgot to mention. So, for Friday, Thursday, even part of Wednesday this week, moon is in detriment in Scorpio. So, it kind of just goes along with this whole idea that I think I've already established, which is I think we're feeling a little bit uncomfortable right now. Moon being in detriment, Mercury's also in detriment. We have a lot of detriment energies. We're just feeling very outside the box, outside of ourselves, feeling a little bit alien. That's necessary, though, in order to gain more perspective. We're going to gain more perspective whether we want to or not. Okay, so this is the beginning of this process. This is probably the most difficult part, honestly, is just starting that whole process. But the good part is that once we get through this whole Mercury retrograde process, and the new moon for that matter, and moon in Scorpio, there's multiple things that are all uncomfortable, but once we get through them, we're gaining greater self-awareness. And I know you want that if you're listening to this forecast, because that's what astrology is all about. Saturday, November 30th, moon finally leaves Scorpio. It will do so pretty early in the day, Eastern Standard Time, and the moon will enter Sagittarius. And so we're getting really close to that new moon aspect. I would go as far as to say that this new moon will kind of dominate the whole weekend. So if you are into this type of thing, make some kind of intentions sometime this weekend, Saturday or Sunday. Sunday, we'll get to Sunday in just a moment, but that is the actual technical day where the new moon happens. But even Saturday, the moon is it's a dark moon, as they say. It's a sliver. We're already in the process of I was gonna say the moon is becoming eclipsed. It's not literally an eclipse, but technically the word eclipse means to be covered, to be hidden. The moon is becoming hidden. It's becoming it's entering the shadow. It's no longer lit. That has a lot of signification. It has a lot of meaning. Moon represents our emotions, our inner selves. So our inner selves are still there, but they're becoming darker. They're becoming more subtle. We're becoming more focused on our thoughts, our feelings, rather than everything just being about literal kind of physical activity and starting something new. It's more about retreating, going within, etc. So I know that's a little bit weird. I think one might look at this chart and say, oh, Mercury, Sun, and Moon are all in Sagittarius. So that should be a super boisterous, outgoing energy, right? That's what Sagittarius usually is. But in this case, that's some of those Sagittarian themes will be there. There's still some kind of merry energy, right? Warm, expansive energy. But at the same time, Mercury retrograde is not expansive at all. The moon closing out its cycle, we're kind of on the eve of a new moon. That's not expansive either. So it's kind of a contradiction. We are experiencing one side of Sagittarius, but this is almost like the dark side of Sagittarius. It's almost the inner world of Sagittarius, if that makes sense. So it is about expanding our hearts, minds, and souls like we typically would do through Sagittarius, but in a untypical kind of way, rather than expanding ourselves through external experiences and branching out to something new on the outside like Sagittarius normally would do. I think this is more, it's almost kind of like Pisces in a weird way. It's almost like expansion of ourselves through the inner world, through the spirit, through the emotions, through thoughts maybe. It's very, I don't know, spiritual, emotional. It's very intuitive. I think this would be an excellent day for well, setting intentions, like I said, it would be a great day for like meditation, setting intentions, or if you are a creative person, this would be a really great creative energy. Anything having to do with like tuning into your inner self. That's what this is all about. This is not the weekend for like partying or for, really extensive planning or some kind of big event. This is more about, I'm going to retreat. I'm going to go to the cabin out in the woods alone and just like, zen out, light some incense and like chill out for a weekend. You know what I mean? That's kind of the ideal version here. Take a hike, go for a walk, like relax. I don't know, whatever you do to process things. Make a pot of soup. I didn't make that up. I'm getting that from the Pleiadians channeled by Barbara Marciniak. That's what they said. Whatever you need to do to integrate, that's what you need to do with times like this. Okay, and then one more day where we have a major event, semi-major event. Sunday, December 1st, this is where we get a new moon in Sagittarius. This will happen early in the day, Eastern Standard Time, when the moon reaches 9 degrees Sagittarius and conjoins the sun. It's very loosely conjunct Mercury, I guess you could say. I mean, not really. It's an orb of 10 degrees. But we do have a cluster, though. Sun, Moon, and Mercury are all, clustered, roughly in the middle of Sagittarius, I guess you could say. So again, yeah, it's really just about looking within, and that can be very uncomfortable. We often don't want to see ourselves. But again, if you're listening to this, I do think you want that on some level. You're wanting a greater self-awareness. You want to figure things out. You want to figure yourself out. You want to figure the world out. And that's no easy task, but I do think an aspect like this is especially lucrative for that type of thing, for building greater self-awareness and expanding your sense of self. But again, it's not necessarily, it could be through some kind of physical like experience, like traveling or something, but more often than not, I think this energy would be more about looking within. So I don't know, maybe traveling on your own will help you to look within. That's fine. But it could be just meditating, journaling, setting intentions, praying. Prayer would be a good one. Any kind of like spiritual, religious activity, creative activity, art, music, something, I don't know, whatever. Each person has their own thing, and that's what's so beautiful about it. It could even be like sports, whatever allows your mind to kind of wander and zone out. That's what's going to allow things to bubble up to the surface. And that would be true for any day, but especially with this dynamic, with the new moon and Mercury recently retrograde at the same time. We have something big to figure out, and it's going to look very different for each person. I've got my own stuff I'm working on and figuring out, and you've got yours, but this is a huge opportunity. It's not the most fun or sexy energy, but I do think this can be very valuable. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. If you have any questions, feel free to comment or email me. My information is always in the description. But that's pretty much what I have for you. So I hope you have an excellent week. Next week we have tons of aspects and a quarter moon, so I hope you tune in then as well. Have a great week. I'll see you later.